Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the HP SPECTRE X360 13t. Now, this machine was launched at the end of 2020, and that was when I first started covering it. And quite frankly, it was a refresh to what was already my favorite Ultrabook on the market, the original 13t. Now, when I say the original, of course, this was the first one to have the 90% screen-to-body ratio, 4K OLED display, and just, in my opinion, a phenomenal design. But if you followed the coverage of the 13T experience I had back at the end of 2019, you know I went through a lot of quality control problems. Well, the good news here is I had none of those issues. This is a review unit. It was sent over by HP for review. This is not a paid review, to be clear. If that were ever the case, I, of course, would be completely transparent about that. So, is this worth buying? Yes, I still think that it is, even here at the current cycle we're in 2021. If you're looking for a two-in-one in this form factor with a UHD, one of the best displays, in my opinion, in its class, especially in this size, very solid build quality, phenomenal keyboard, great function keys, love the LEDs on both the mute switch and microphone mute. We've got a kill switch for the Windows Hello IR camera up at the top center. Do wish the webcam was a little bit better, just like I wish the speakers were better on this, but you have to remember what you're getting yourself into. This is an incredibly compact machine, and really delivers something that few manufacturers do. I mean, Lenovo has some comparables, but beyond that, not a whole lot compares to this. 360 degrees of rotation, because of course this is a two-in-one. So in my opinion, these are the type of machines that have made what once was amazing with products like the Surface Pro line no longer relevant. Of course, because of its weight, because of its battery life and overall capability, it puts it in a unique category. The pen has been improved this year over last. I mentioned this in my coverage, if you followed any of it. Type-C charging, so no batteries needed, no batteries required. And pen input here, I really feel for the first time, is right on point with the Surface Pro line, which I used to say had the edge over manufacturers like HP, specifically since they're using the same tech and Microsoft literally owns the technology in that they purchased N-Trig. I now feel like what we're working with, because it is exactly the same tech, is right on par. So if you're wondering as a digital artist, is this going to be right for you? Even though I didn't do an inking review of this, it's a slight improvement over the previous generation. I still think that these are a happy medium for people who want to sketch, take notes, students, artists alike. But if digital art is your ultimate goal, two-in-ones are what they sound like. They're two-in-ones. They're not the best medium for you. You're going to have to go towards dedicated devices, which is a whole nother realm that I don't cover. And for that, I lean on my fiance, who is the artist in the household. But for note-taking and drawing in general, you're not going to not enjoy using this. The only issue with the pen here, nowhere to really attach it. There is no magnetic area like with the 14T. It sticks really nicely to the side of the machine. You can stick it onto the back, where the bezels meet, but I don't recommend that. It'll pop right off, but that seems to be the only spot that it really secures to. Now, what does this machine do really well? It does basically everything you could want in an incredibly compact Ultrabook, which is why I loved the 13T to begin with in 2019 and 2020, and here still in 2021. The i7-1165G7 under the hood is a step up from the previous generation, the 1065. More importantly, Iris Xe graphics, Evo certification. You can actually do a little bit more gaming here, a little bit more power overall when it comes to light video editing, 4K video editing, photo editing, but not leaps and bounds ahead of the 10th gen. So if you can still find 10th gen machines on the market and the price is compelling, just like when this first came out, I still think it's a better way to go. Now, when this machine gets refreshed, which I assume is not so far away, and we start getting Gen 4 NVMe drives under the hood. This does not have one. This is I believe a 1 terabyte NVMe drive. It's a Gen 3 drive, the SSD, the M.2. Still very, very fast, but Gen 4, of course, pretty much almost doubles the speed. We're not there yet. Even though we have Tiger Lake in this machine, it just wasn't part of this chipset's compatibility. So, nonetheless, performance is great. Battery life is solid. The machine does get hot. After all, it is so compact, and HP really has crammed everything under the sun into this tiny laptop. So on the left side, you can see we've got our headphone jack, our Type A USB port, which is something I'm glad they didn't give up on yet, and then two Thunderbolt 4 ports here, your privacy switch, and micro SD card slot. And those are things I really value. Ventilation along the bottom and right here at the back of the chassis. But this thing does get hot. Don't kid yourself. You know, you're not going to fry an egg, but it is really compact, and that's part of the price you pay, not in terms of monetary, but in terms of its form factor and processor. It is an Intel chip, so, you know, if you know Intel, you know they don't necessarily run too cool. And that's what we can hope for in the refresh, is that we're going to see something with better battery life, something a little bit cooler. But this pretty much checks every box I could want as a content creator. And if we hadn't just been through a pandemic, traveling light, well, this pretty much defines it. The most compelling thing, though, about this machine is pricing. I mean, when I bought this one, which is basically the same one, but with slightly older hardware, of course, no Thunderbolt 4, 1065 G7, no Iris Xe graphics, slightly inferior pen. In fact, I paid for an upgraded pen that doesn't outperform this one. It was over $2,000. Now, this build with the better CPU, Thunderbolt 4, same display, no QC problems, fingerprint scanners right there, by the way, same trackpad, pretty much the same everything, best-in-class keyboard, in my opinion. Love the keyboard, still to this day, one of my favorites. It's just, this is a form factor that is the definition of go everywhere. I mean, in my favorite camera bag, this fits into the space designed for an iPad. Enough said. And I have a real computer. Granted, an Ultrabook, but a real computer. And I'll be sad to see this go, because anyone who follows my channel knows that the 13T was my fave, and so this is no different. We've got upgrades, but do the upgrades blow away the old version? No. If we had a Gen 4 NVMe drive, I might shed a tear, not literally, but overall, it's a nice performance boost and bump, but the pricing is where, again, as I was just stating, is the biggest improvement. And that's because of parity. Maybe it's scaling, so the economies of scale to actually manufacture and put this together became less expensive because it's not the first gen of this chassis, this screen, all of those things. So right now, $1,600 in change US gets you the machine you're looking at here, which I think is an absolute steal. And as it gets older, like as we get closer to it getting to a year old down the line, I mean, you'll probably be able to get this same build. Again, the OLED UHD display, i7 processor, 16 gigs of RAM. By the way, the RAM is soldered, so be sure you know what you're going with, whether it's 8 or 16 gigs. I recommend going with 16. There are some of you out there, of course, that can get away with 8, but it's pretty much an ideal machine as long as you're not looking to do desktop replacement-esque stuff. So even if I, was running, again, 4K video editing, not a problem. And one of the other nice things is that with this generation, you actually can run in performance mode off of power. Now, with the 10th gen Intel chipset, the one I have, not the 11th gen Tiger Lake, you had to actually be hooked up to the 65 watt Type-C charger. So that's one of the things I like about another advantage of this machine over mine. Is it enough to make me want to buy it? No, but I think it is a much welcomed improvement because even if that eats up battery faster, I never really liked the fact it was one of those things where there's something about having an incredibly portable, powerful, compact machine like this, but then you've got to plug it in order to get full capability out of it. Here, you don't have to do that, and I like that a lot about the refresh. Charge time, a little over an hour, gets you a full charge. You're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, depending on what you're really doing with it. You might be able to get a little bit more than that, but that's being realistic. Screen brightness is a matter of personal preference. This is 100%, taking it down to the lowest level. Generally, I work at around 50%, but sometimes 75. It depends on lighting conditions. I highly recommend going with the OLED version of this device, but if you want more battery life, if you want to save some money, you can go with the IPS panel. In fact, you don't have to go 4K, of course. Instead of UHD, you can just go full HD. The aspect ratio is another point of contention for some of you. For me personally, 16:9 is still where it's at, because as a content creator, I want something that is going to give me exactly what my content is going to look like. And again, with that aspect ratio, it just fits basically anywhere. Looking at the 14T, I really like that machine as well. It's basically the same machine, but with the 3:2 aspect ratio, which some of you will prefer. I think it's great that you have both options. The 14T has some advantages over this machine. This machine gets a little bit hotter, but that's because it's smaller. This machine doesn't have as tall a display, but I get to look at what I'm actually producing. I don't have black bars on the screen because of scaling associated with the aspect ratio. So those are things you have to take into account. If you're doing coding, things like that, the 3:2 aspect ratio is a welcome thing. But if you're not, if you're just a general consumer, student, general content consumption and work, productivity, I still don't see anything wrong with 16:9, but that's really a matter of personal preference. So things to know, as I've stated, we've gone over the keyboard is great, display is best in class. Color accuracy is basically perfect. That's the beauty of OLED and HP, that marriage. These Samsung panels are phenomenal. So best keyboard in class. I would like to see the trackpad get a little bit larger, but considering how small this deck is, who knows that we'll ever get there, right? I'd also like to see the speakers get a little bit better. They're basically exactly the same as what we had with the 13T. A little different, but not enough to talk about. Want to see that webcam get better. This is a critique for all manufacturers. HP's not alone on this. And I thought it was a trend that would get fleshed out over the course of the pandemic, but it still hasn't. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It seems that most manufacturers still believe that a webcam is good to have, but it isn't going to influence a decision. And quite frankly, they're right, because look at my Asus G15. I bought that laptop knowing it has no webcam, and that's nearly a $2,000 gaming laptop. So manufacturers, even though I could always say webcams can improve, they know they could actually get rid of them if they want to. But having IR and Windows Hello on this, to me, is something that every business user, every productivity user, every person that's looking for what an Ultrabook should be, should have. And so HP was the first to really squeeze it into the tiny bezel, which I think is part of the beauty of this machine. I love the silver finish. That's why the version I own is silver and not one of the other colors. If I had to go with another, it would be the Poseidon blue. It's just a great machine. Pen input's fantastic. The only downside, as I mentioned, it does get a little bit hot to the touch physically, and I do wish we could get a little more out of the battery, but I think we're going to see parity. I/O, I think, is solid. Still having a micro SD card slot, still having, Thunderbolt 4 ports, as in 2, which is not something you get from every manufacturer, and still having USB Type A. You're not going to get that. Again, at this price point, this pretty much still checks every box, as long as you do not need dedicated graphics and a more powerful processor. That's when you start to transition into, of course, desktop replacement class machines for gaming, content creation, all of those items. Now, as I stated, this still can game. This still can be used for content creation. You just have to understand its limitations. So I think this is perfect for professionals that are mobile, even though the pandemic hasn't left a lot of us mobile, obviously, for safety reasons, the obvious ones, if you believe in science. And then the other thing is that, students, I think this is perfect. Again, the pricing being significantly less than the previous generation, I think, is a bonus. In fact, I never thought I'd be saying that the 13T is like the value winner, but it is. If you're looking at it from a pricing perspective, it is nearly impossible to beat this machine at its price point. Especially on any given day with the sale with HP and coupons, who knows what you could get it for. And so that is really compelling. So the 13T is still my favorite Ultrabook. The 14T almost stole that title, but I'm still true to this because this is the go anywhere, fit in any bag, and still deliver all of the capability and capacity that you'd expect. I would like to see HP offer higher than a 2 terabyte configuration on this, but that's still where things sit, and I think that's still more than enough for the majority of users. Again, I highly recommend going with the OLED unless you want to save that coin and get a little more battery life, which isn't a bad thing, but I think that the OLED is one of the biggest draws to this tiny yet incredibly powerful Ultrabook that is still under 3 pounds. Really like what HP has done with the 13T, even though it's not a drastic redesign, just the pen alone and Thunderbolt 4, and again, performance mode. Those are all things that are nice. The kill switch, is pretty much the same. They've done software-oriented kill switches in Ultrabooks like the 14T. The 14T was the real redesign, new product category of 2020, 2021. This was a refresh. So again, if you want the best that HP has to offer, and in my opinion, the industry for the most part, the 13T is where it's at if you want 2-in-1 functionality. It's the best of both worlds. It's still small enough and light enough that, it is competitive, in my opinion, with the Surface Pro, but it beats it in every way, shape, and form. The Surface Pro seems one-dimensional, and trust me, I love the Surface Pro line. I was basically the biggest advocate for it. Unfortunately, computing has moved away from trying to give us a tablet that can replace a laptop, and instead you just have a laptop that's really good. Now, there are other options from Lenovo that I'm reviewing presently, the X12 detachable, which I think are also better options than a Surface Pro. And HP has some more tricks up their sleeves as well. It's just that Microsoft has just let that product go. They created a trend, and like Apple, they then kind of just got a little bit lazy. And that's why products like this are where my money goes rather than the Surface Pro lineup here in 2021. And I recommend you do the same, even if it's not an HP. If you really want 2-in-1 and tablet-esque form factor, you can do it in a machine like this or something from Lenovo at a better price and with far better processing capability and I/O than anything Microsoft will offer. Microsoft will offer you design cues you may like better, but I don't know how you could, considering still the Surface Pro looks like something from 5 years ago. Some would argue even more years than 5. So again, the Spectre 13T, powered by Intel's 11th gen processor, is a winner. When I unboxed it at the end of 2020, and here revisiting it in 2021, I can easily recommend this without reservation. The only thing to be wary of is a refresh, and I haven't gotten word yet that it's imminent, but it's coming. It always is. Once a year we get a refresh. So towards the end of the year, I expect to see a new version of this. So if you can wait, it probably is worth it. If you need a machine right now, though, and you need something that's portable, you're looking at it. Really hard to beat this, especially, reiterating again, pricing is amazing on this machine. In particular, the 14T, you're paying a premium. You go up to the 15-incher, you're paying a premium. For some odd reason, this form factor is the most affordable, and yet to me, the most compelling. So, great, solid battery life. I almost said great battery life. Gets a little bit hot. Great pen input, great portability, great I/O, and the styling on it, I still think in silver, all business, but capable of just about anything you want. Let's just get some improved speakers, a little bit better battery life, and I think it'll be the next step in the 13T world. And let's find a way to attach this redesigned pen, which absolutely is better than the previous generation, not just in terms of design, but functionality and battery life, and not needing batteries. Like it. Good move by HP. They just did not find a place to put it. I mean, it sticks there, but, not, well, point made, right? Not well enough. So hopefully we eventually get that. But again, hard to go wrong with this machine as long as you understand everything I've explained. Great performance. Just make sure you pick the right model when it comes to the RAM. The processor, I would go i7 on here. if you want to get the full lifespan out of this. But i5 isn't a bad option. It's just a matter of, if you do plan on doing any of the things I mentioned, like photo or video editing, then you're going to wish you had the i7 and the 16 gigs of RAM. Just remember that. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.